お願いします. Hi, I'm Sensei Steve here at Classical Martial Arts of Long Island. And today I want to talk to you a little bit about sparring. So sparring is an interesting term, an interesting event or part of the martial arts. And it's sometimes a little misunderstood. Now, we teach both Japanese and Chinese martial arts, but in the Japanese martial arts, we use the word kumite. And kumi means to be paired, and te means hand. So kumite means paired hand practice, meaning I work with a partner. I pair my hands to my partner's hands. It's similar to a term in swordsmanship called kumitachi, which means paired sword practice. But in kumite, paired practice, it's not just one format. And that's sometimes misunderstood in the martial arts and by people outside the martial arts. So, and by misunderstanding it, we sometimes don't see why we do things a certain way and how we do it and what benefit we get out of it. So whenever we work with a partner, we could be doing drills, certain formats, certain prearranged sequences, all called, at least in Japanese, kumite. And the first idea is that there's often a set drill where we have an agreement, where we work with a partner, and we call it ippon kumite, single step kumite. Meaning, going from doing practices in the air, I start doing practices with a partner, where perhaps I throw a punch and he throws a defense, or he throws a punch and I throw a defense, and we work back and forth. Now that might be barefisted, might have no equipment, because we know what's going to happen and we know what's going to go on, and we want to condition our arms. So if we had to block, had to deal with a strike coming in, we could handle it. That's one skill. That's one component. Now that might mean it's a punch, a kick, could even be a throw. The response could be a throw. And that approach, known as ippon kumite, single step sparring, one-step sparring, can be very useful to start to build an understanding, start to build timing, start to build distancing, start to build execution and focus of technique. Great. Well, a step beyond that is what we call nihon kumite, two-step. Two-step would be your partner throws one technique, you do a defense, they throw a second technique, you do a defense. Then perhaps you do a riposte, you do an attack back at them. In that format, you're just building on the same thing of 1 and 2 versus having a single step and single response. Well, you can already predict the third thing would be sanbon kumite, 3-step. And in 3-step, it's, I do 1 attack, then 2 attacks, then 3 attacks, each one you're doing an appropriate defense. Training in that format, we try to train appropriate defense, meaning if he strikes in a certain quadrant, I'm launching a good defense in that quadrant. Right? I'm able to respond to it, maybe take a different angle, move myself, respond to it, keep the proper distancing, keep the proper timing, but also it has a low affect, a low emotional filter. Because when people work with each other, they immediately get nervous. I'm going to get hit. I'm going to get hurt. What do I do? And by doing this scripted response, we start to overcome that. Similar in many ways to boxing, where they do combinations, and they might do combinations on focus mitts, they might do combinations on a bag, they might do combinations with a trainer. In the same format, we can work in those dynamics to get one used to responding with a person. Now, beyond that, we talk about jiu kumite, which is free sparring. But even within free sparring, which allows to free response to break the mold, to break the pattern, still in free response or free sparring, it's able to have free one-step sparring, which means the person stands there and they get to throw one technique, any technique they want, and you have to try to do one appropriate defense. Well, you don't exactly know what's coming, but it's only one. It's a little scary, but not a lot. All right. Well, you can do that same format of free sparring, but with a 2-step dynamic. So they get to throw 2 techniques. Could be 2 hand techniques. Could be a hand and a foot technique. Could be 2 foot techniques. Whatever 2 techniques they want to throw. And then you have to do an appropriate response. They could do it more slowly. They could do it more quickly. And then we could bump it up to do free response or free sparring with 3 techniques. You get the idea. As we do that, then we can take all the controls, or not all the controls, but we can take many of the controls off of it and say, it's now truly free sparring where I can throw any number of sequence of techniques. My partner can do defenses. Now my partner can also attack or riposte or take the lead, and we can go back and forth. And that's commonly what people think of as sparring. Great. No problem. But now we'd say, well, what about all the stuff I have in front of me? This is all different types of equipment because there's further subdivisions in sparring. So one idea in sparring is what we call point sparring, where we're trying to touch lightly to score a point, kind of like fencing. And this is often where we start people. And in that response, we often use equipment like this. This is foam dipped equipment, and this is, of course, sized for children, this one, right? But it's very soft, it's foam, and it's been dipped in this red polyvinyl. And then this is a boot that goes on the foot so they can hit with the foot. This is not designed for heavy contact. This is designed to meter a light touch in case it hits you, right? So this is in terms of those little boots that we have there. And this would be the helmet that matches that. This helmet and the gloves are inside the helmet. And in these gloves, and this helmet has a face shield attached to it, but this helmet also is foam dipped, the polyvinyl foam dip, right? And so therefore it's not designed to take heavy contact, but it's designed so that when the person comes in, if they come and they tap a little bit because they're trying to reach you and it bangs you, it softens it so that no one gets injured, okay? Or no one really gets bothered. Right? So, and these are the gloves that would match that. And these gloves, again, are small size. But the thing about these gloves is that they do have the front part where the hand goes is open and the fingers have some opening. So it allows you to grab. So you're allowed to grab the arm, maybe hit with the other one, but it curves over covering the knuckles. Okay. So these again are meant to tap, not necessarily drive heavy force. So if you ever see people doing this kind of sparring with this kind of equipment, they're not really usually hitting very hard. That doesn't mean they don't know how to hit hard. Maybe they don't, I'm not sure. But it means that they're trying to work on control, balance, timing, precision, distancing. They're trying to work on reaction. We often call this speed sparring because it rewards the person who's quicker. It's a type of tag. In all honesty, it's a type of tag. But heaven forbid you're in a fight, but one part of fight is tag. Who can hit the other guy first? So this type of equipment is for that. And we can do, as I mentioned before, the more freestyle sparring, or we can do the component of 1-step, 2-step, or 3-step, all with this type of equipment. Well, there's other types of equipment. I have more stuff on the table here, right? So other types of equipment are heavier. So this type of equipment is for higher contact. This is a combined shin and instep protector that goes down over the foot. And it's thicker, much thicker. And it's better padded, and it's got a type of leather on the surface. So that when you hit with this, you can hit with more force because this absorbs more force. So therefore, you can hit the person harder and kick them harder, and they're still somewhat protected. I say somewhat because since you're hitting harder, you're imparting more force to your partner. This allows us to practice and hit harder without injuring the partner, because we're really not after injury. If we're talking about self-defense, and heaven forbid you have to have a self-defense encounter or you're faced with one, you have to hit the person in a place that is not a scoring zone. You'd have to kick them in the knee. You'd have to kick them in the groin. You'd have to use your skills as best you could to actually hurt the person. In training, we're not going to kick the person in the knee. We're not going to kick the person in the groin. We're going to kick the person in zones that maybe represent the knee and the groin. Maybe we kick them above that at the belt level. Maybe we kick them in the thigh, kick them in the calf, which still can be very destabilizing. A hard shot in the thigh can take someone down, but we're not kicking them in the spot where they can be damaged permanently. So, and the equipment, this heavier equipment, it allows us to be able to practice more intensely. Well, those are the shin pads that would go with that. And then this kind of helmet, which again has the leather cover and the thicker padding, that has a face cage sewn into it. And this can take a harder shot, and your head can take a harder shot. This is almost like what you see, similar to a boxing helmet. And this can be used so that the person can hit harder. You can both hit harder. And the plastic doesn't give, but the rest of the leather and the assembly gives. So therefore, your face is most protected. So you don't have to go home with a face that only a mother could love. Okay? Along with that, you see different types of gloves. And so matching this approach, you see something like we'll call a mixed use glove. And this is a mixed use glove. And a mixed use glove, like the point sparring gloves, allows your hand to be open on the inside, but wraps around and covers and is padded so that you don't have to wrap your hands like a boxer wraps the hands. So you have to wrap the hands. So it allows you to grab, allows you to punch, allows you to hit with the back fist, allows you to do a lot of those movements, and it comes down and covers and wraps your wrist. So that your wrist is protected. So if you do something like a knife hand or such, then your wrist is covered. That's a mixed use glove. And that glove goes along with this heavier equipment being able to bear more force. Now, a different type of glove would be an MMA glove, because an MMA glove looks a little different. And this is an MMA glove. It's even labeled MMA. But an MMA glove doesn't have as much padding in the same spots and oftentimes lets you wrap your hands like a boxer does. And that's the kind of ones we can use them for practice, but they're also the ones that could be used in competition, allowing that. Well, I also have two other pieces of equipment here to talk about. This helmet is more similar to a boxing helmet. And this helmet comes in, covers the cheekbones, the zygomatic arch, doesn't have a face cradle, so your nose and your eyes are sticking out a little bit. And so this allows it to be a little bit more, if you want to say it, realistic, where you don't want to get hit in the face because those areas are exposed, and allows us to hit relatively hard, but at the same time allows the challenge of not getting hit in the face. But also this type of helmet is very useful if we're going to do what's often called takedown sparring, right? Or sparring where we kick and punch and we engage and we throw and take them to the ground. And even follow on to grappling on the ground, which would be more similar to what you see in an MMA situation, right? Or is actually very traditional. If you look at the East Asian martial arts, punch, kick, and take down to the ground is still part of the East Asian martial arts. Well, this allows that a little better than the one with the face cage, because the face cage makes it harder on both the player who's wearing it and on the player who's working against it to do the ground holds, because that hard plastic doesn't really let the person control and move around the head as easily as this one would. Now, one more set of gloves that I have here that we'll talk about, and I'll mention another one. But these gloves from the Gladiator Company, these are an old style gloves. Oftentimes people call these Jeet Kune Do gloves. These are gloves made popular by Bruce Lee back in the day. And these gloves, almost like bear gloves, will fit on your hand. They have a lot of padding on the outside, so you don't have to wrap your hand. They also extend down all the way to the fingertips, and they have the leather on the inside. They allow you to grab, they allow you to open your hand, and they cover all the way down to the finger to allow other types of complex strikes. So these gloves are another version of the tools that we can use if we want to then do more sparring that allows us to grab, to hit with different surfaces, to move in different ways. Well, I don't have a set here with me. I didn't pull them out of the closet for us, but there's also boxing gloves. And we can also use boxing gloves, but boxing gloves make our hands unable to grip. And those gloves, we can sometimes use those, or we can use those depending on the competition we go to, so that when we hit, that restricts us only to hitting. Okay. Two other pieces of equipment here before I want to talk a little more about types of sparring. One type of equipment here, this is called a trainer's body protector. This is very thick. You often see it used in Muay Thai. You see it used in boxing. Right? It's very thick. This one's from the Manor company. This we'll often use when someone's going to be the trainer. They'll wear the body protector, put on a helmet, put on gloves, maybe the boots, and then the other partner is working, and the person wearing this is acting as the bad guy or the person who poses a question of movement. They're throwing techniques, and the other person has to do defense and riposte and hit, and they can hit the body very hard because the person wearing this, the trainer, allows them to hit, allows them, doesn't do nothing, but will attack and allow the person to riposte, to come back at them. Therefore, the other person, the student, learns better. Right? So again, different types of sparring, different tools. Now this one that's sitting on this other side, this is a little thinner. It's also a body protector. This body protector is leather in the front and it's padded, but this is a kind of body protector because it's thinner, you can move better in. And this one we'll put on when we have people go to heavier levels of contact so that they can hit and they can bear it. Now, doing enough sit-ups, enough abdominal conditioning, you could bear it also. but then you wouldn't necessarily be able to do as many rounds. So this lets you do more rounds. Very useful for training, this kind of body protector, along with the heavier use gloves and heavier use shin protectors and headgear too. Okay, all that stuff, tools that we use, all that equipment. Additionally, let's talk for a moment about different types of sparring. Because we mentioned before, 1-step, 2-step, 3-step, free sparring, sure. But there's different parameters in sparring. Is the sparring that you're doing just intended to get you good at striking? Striking with the hands, striking with the legs. That's one set of skills that you can practice. Oh, is the type of sparring you're doing trying to get you used to punching and kicking and trapping their arms or holding on to them, kind of trying to block them and push their arm down and come in? That's another type of sparring, right? Is the type of sparring you're doing punching and kicking and throwing, taking them off their feet, sweeping their foot, throwing them down? Is that what you're doing? Is what you're doing allowing you to throw them on the ground and hit them on the ground? Is what you're doing allowing you to punch and kick and throw and go to the ground and try to pin them or submit them with an arm bar, with a choke, with a leg bar? What are we trying to do? What's the format? Or is the sparring starting with weapons? Because we do have padded weapons. So does it start with weapon fighting, with 2 swords or 2 sticks, or moving in that sense, or 1 stick and someone without a stick? What are we simulating? What are we doing? What format? Are we only throwing? Are we only working on the ground? Are we only striking? Are we integrating those skills? These are all different types of sparring. Are we working without equipment and working without equipment lightly to get used to not having the extra padding or not having the helmet that makes our head effectively larger, effectively bigger? Are we working without the equipment, with the equipment? Are we working without equipment with heavy contact, without equipment with light contact? Are we working on the ground with no equipment and trying to get submissions? Are we trying to get pins? All these dynamics lead to different approaches. All those types of sparring are all drills. And the rubric in all martial arts is drills give you skills. Those skills have to be transferable into some other setting if we're talking about the training for self-defense. Right? If we're talking about the training for sport, then the skills translate into sport competition. And sport groups have rules. There are certain rules for point fighting leagues. Some have 7 points to victory, some have 3 points to victory, some have 5. Some allow you to grab the arm and hit, some don't. Some allow you to sweep the foot, some don't. There is semi-contact fighting, which means you hit pretty hard, but you wear a lot of equipment. There's full contact fighting. Well, what type of full contact fighting? Kickboxing, which you have to wear a boxing glove and you can kick and you can hit, but you can hit as hard as you want? Or are we talking about traditional Kyokushin or Shoshin Kaikan or other different traditional types of fighting where you're looking at the dynamic where you can hit hard, no equipment perhaps in their full contact divisions, no equipment, just your mouthpiece and a cup, and you can hit them very hard, but you're not allowed to grab them. You're not allowed to throw them. You're allowed to kick them and hit them, maybe sweep a foot, but you're not allowed to engage and grapple. Are we talking about mixed martial arts dynamics? And if so, which set of rules? Because there are different rules. Are we talking about judo or suijiao, Chinese wrestling? Or are we talking about sambo, which is Russian wrestling? Or are we talking about different types of rule sets that apply to the ground game, such as rules for BJJ or Kosen Jiu-Jitsu, Kosen Judo, or such like that go to the ground? So what rules are we talking about, right? All these rules have certain parameters to keep the players safe, to let them compete, to let them be scored and judged, and ideally let everyone have a good time. Hopefully. Sometimes competition is frustrating, but hopefully everyone having a good time. And everyone go home, be able to say, you know, that was good. I'm coming back next time and doing better. And I got to go back and work on my drills. Or if you're training for self-defense, do we then work all these sparring things for all those skills that we got from the drills? But then do we do simulated self-defense, which in Japanese is called Goshinjutsu, where we simulate, where one guy comes in and he simulates what would be an attack outside. He simulates an attack with a knife or simulates an attack where he's going to try to steal your stuff. And you have to do a defense. And in those drills, oftentimes the drill ends when the person who's being attacked gets away. because in self-defense, victory is escape, as opposed to in sporting contests, where victory is defeating someone by a set of rules. So if you haven't picked up on it, this whole concept of sparring is pretty involved. A lot of different formats, all different components. And depending on where you go, what school you go to, what league you compete in, depending on what you see online, which tradition you practice, which format, you may have a different type of drill, all called the same thing. So as the old saying goes, don't compare apples and oranges. So sometimes you have a view from a certain type of training. If you apply that to something else, sometimes it doesn't work. So when you look at these things, be broad-minded and say, is there a skill they're getting from the drill? And if they are, how's that working? Could I work with that same drill, get that skill and add it to my training? Well, if that was interesting and you like that kind of stuff, come on down to Classical Martial Arts. We give everybody 2 weeks free trial if you want to come do class with us and learn how to spar. All right, so have a great day. Thank you so much. Domo arigatou gozaimasu.